until you started sharing the screen.
Okay, hold on 1 second. We're starting in 1 second. Let me just let me switch over to the DAF share. Okay. All right, here we go. You guys see everything?
It's coming, the circle spinning.
Okay. All righty. So we are holding in middle of, do you see it now, Aaron?
Nope, it's still spinning. Mandy Levitt has started screen sharing. Now it's there.
Okay. All right. So we're holding in middle. I'm going to scroll down to where we're holding. We are holding in the story of Ishbi. And let me see if I have the right daf here. Hold on. No, it's the wrong daf. So we're holding the story of Ishbi and David. Ishbi is the son. Ishbi is the son is the brother of Goliath, and he. Sorry, let me just bring it down. And he's angry at David because David killed his brother Goliath in the war with Saul. Okay, so this Gemorah says this: Yishbi b'nai Basher v'lidei harafa. So Yishbi, which is who was the sons of the giants. Rafa also means Arpa, which is his mother. Arpa was the sister-in-law of Ruth. Both married Naomi's sons before they died. Umishkal kenai shloish meyos mishkal nachoshes v'yachager chadasha, and his weight was the weight of his spear was 300 shekels of brass. Obviously heavy. It means he had a big armament and he was strong and he was huge. He was a giant, and v'chager chadasha, and he was girded with new armor, so he was ready for fighting. Vayomer lahakis is David, and he wanted to hit David, King David. What's the story? What's going on? Yishbi b'nov. What does it mean Yishbi and Nov? Again, we established last week that Nov is a city that is near Jerusalem, is the city that King Saul killed, the city of the priest. So it says like this. Amar Yehuda Amarav, Isha Baal Iske Nov. The story is connected to the story of Nov. Meaning to say is that the problem with Yishbi was he was upset and that there was a punishment that came from Nov. What's the point? Amar Yehuda Amarav, Isha Baal Iske Nov. Amalek Kadosh Baruch Hu David. God said to David at some point as he was king, Ad Masa Oven Zeh Tomim V'Dercha. How long is the sin that you caused for the people of Nov to die? Because what happened was, again, this quick story: David is being chased by Saul. Saul finds out that he's hiding in the city of Nov, the city of priests. He kills the entire priest. He kills everyone. Achimelech, which was the high priest. Aviasar Cohen is the only one left alive. So God says, you're the cause of it, even though you didn't do anything. You're being you. But I guess you're being you too good, and somewhere or another for tzaddikim, for righteous people, even if they're not directly the cause, but if the reason happened because of them, they have to pay a price. So Ayatcha Neharaga Nov Yarkayin, because of you, the city of Kohanim, Nov was destroyed. Again, the city of Nov is someplace near Jerusalem. Some people say it's what's today Ramat Shlomo, which is next to French Hill, or by French Hill. So Vayatcha Nitra Doeg Adami. And not only that, he blames him for Doeg Ha'adami's was banished because of what he did. And he was Doeg, was the one who fulfilled Saul's command to kill the city of Nov. And why was Saul killed and his three sons, Jonathan and the other sons, was because of what they did in Nov. So Nov was and even though they did it, they chose to do it, and even though David was just, so to say, a consequence, but that's not how Hashem looks at it, and therefore David has to pay. There has to be a punishment for David. So we see Rashi. Rashi says, "V'yesh for benov I did the arli il ba'isa yom shenishtar me'oyin shal noiv nakatacha v'yesh b'noiv shabal iskenov." Because we were just talking about that. The Yom Benov, that Sancheriv came to the city of Nov when he looked over from Nov. Now, again, if Nov is French Hill, or Nov is even Ramat Ashkol. These are very high elevations, Frenchel, with the name that does the name Frenchel. So there would be, it makes sense for them to see, especially in Mount Scopus, to see into Jerusalem. To make it easier to see into Jerusalem, it makes sense that he would be standing there to look into the city. So because we talked about Sanhedrin in the city of Nov, so therefore we're going to talk about this story of Ishbi and Nov. Harpa, who is Harpa? So giants means Arpa. Arpa is the mother of Ishbi, also the mother of Galias, again the sister-in-law of Ruth, and both of them were daughter-in-laws of Naomi. Is Mishka from the story of Ruth, obviously. Mishka keni mitargamin mitakel seifinia. Okay, the weight of his armament. V'chaga chadasha v'aser aspinki chadadta. He had a new armor. Okay, nitra doeg adoimi. So what's the story with Doeg? Why is Dov? So, but David's being punished for three things. One is being the cause of, or God's discussing his punishment with him. One is the cause of the city of Nov to be destroyed. Second one is the cause of Doeg's downfall. And the third, again, Doeg was a big Talmud Chacham. These people weren't, although the Torah refers to them as Rishayim, as wicked people, and they were wicked people, but they're not wicked in the sense of what we understand. And then well, we do understand, but they weren't just people from the street. They were people of Torah study, of people who had reputation of Torah study, like Achitophel. And then also the third one is that Saul was killed because of it. Saul and his three sons were killed for their involvement, obviously, for him giving the order. So what's Nitra Doig? So Doimish is Sipur Lashon Hara al David Shiniskana Boy Shol. He told Saul that David is hiding over there, and he told Saul about the things that were making. We learned before in the Gemorah. He said all these things to when they were looking for a violinist or a musician to play for Saul. So he kind of said all these qualities to get Saul jealous of David. So David's good qualities that were exaggerated for no reason, so to say, by Doeg, just in order to get Saul jealous of David. But David is part of the story. Well, the feature Kibul Achimelech as David ben Nov, and when David was hidden by Achimelech, again the high priest in the city of Nov, or the area of Nov, Armalei Shah Sav v'Paga b'Kainei Hashem, go destroy the city of the Kohanim of God. Nimtza Shayotcha Neherga, they were killed because of you. V'ata Nichshol. And because of that was one of the reasons God punished Saul, that he had to be killed, and his three sons in the war against the Philistines. So now we'll skip this footnote. So he says like this: so God at least gave him David a choice. You have two choices in order to rectify this sin. One is yichlu zaracha, that your children will be destroyed. It means he'll lose all the children of David. We'll see about that in a second. I'm going to put you in the hands of the enemy. Seemingly, in the hands of the enemy would mean that David would be killed, right? So David responded to God, Master of the universe, better put me in the hands of my enemies, and my children shouldn't be destroyed. So he didn't agree for his children to be destroyed. He would rather that he himself take the heat, so to say. Okay, it doesn't happen right away, right? God has many ways of doing things, and now he's so to say, now he has to one day this is going to come to a story. Yom Chad, one day, Nafak liskar bezayu. So this is why I posted, those who are in the groups, I posted that the idea of the falcon. So those days, even today, I think, if you go to certain countries in Saudi Arabia and in the Arabians, that they use the falcons as a help towards hunting. So the falcon will find the prey, so to say. So David also participated in that kind of I don't know if you want to call it sport or he did it as a way of hunting for food. So you would have to assume as king he wouldn't need that as for a meal. But either way, he went on the hunt with the falcon. Asa Satan, so now Satan came, and he made himself look like a deer. So that was what we're looking for. He's looking to hunt a deer, right? Is psakbe girav lemate. He threw an arrow at the deer and did not reach it. Not going to go into all the questions of halachic over here, how this worked killing through hunting, through as opposed to slaughtering. Obviously, if he would hunt it like that, he wouldn't be able to eat it. So maybe to make it the skin into Sefer Torah, other reasons. Okay. So he chased the deer. He was hot on the chase. He lost caution, David. And the deer, which was really Satan, with the falcon, the whole story is chasing him he's running towards the Philistines. And all of a sudden he came in this eyesight, and he's alone, evidently. King David's alone. And when he sees Ishbi, Goliath's brother, sees him. This is the guy who killed my brother Goliath. Means this is David. Again, and there is a relation. I have to remember, maybe Avi, or others know. And if I'm not mistaken, that Orpah and Ruth were not just sister-in-laws who married Naomi's brothers. I think they were actually themselves sisters. If I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to find it, but I couldn't see it yesterday. But I think they were actually relatives themselves, not just that they met sister-in-laws through marriage. So that would make, because Orpah's children were not through Naomi. Goliath and Ishbi were children that she had in her free behavior, like the Gemorah says in Gemorah Sota about Orpah, how she turned into, so to say, a woman she was available to every man in the Philistines. So either way, kids, when Ishvi saw David, he said, "This is the one who killed Goliath, my brother." Kafte kamate. So he bent over David. He was stronger than David, evidently. David himself was a warrior, but one-on-one against Ishvi, it didn't seem like that was a fair fight. And so he bent him over, like I guess tied him down. And he wanted to crush him in an olive press. So he put him under the olive press to crush him. And so a miracle happened. And what was the miracle? That there was the earth became soft. So when instead of the earth being a strong surface, and with the pressure of the weight and the weight of the olive press, he would be crushed. If the earth is kind of like quicksand, so it just pushes him into the earth. So there was a miracle; he wasn't killed by that method of him killing it. That's what Rashi says. Others say the ground kind of. Rashi says there's two pshat. One was that the ground became soft or became like a opening. There's a legend has it, the story of Rashi's mother that they were trying to kill her in the road, and there was only space for either a wagon or a person. And Rashi's mother kind of stood by the wall thinking that's it. She was pregnant with Rashi, and the wall moved in France. So similar to this, the ground moved in, and therefore they wouldn't crush David. Is Machle Arabi Toisei. So what did he do? That is the earth. Machle Arabi Toisei. The earth kind of got soft, and he was able to get into the earth, and he wasn't crushed. That's what it says in Psalms when he talks about this miracle. He says, "You have enlarged my steps beneath me, that my feet did not slip." Meaning that because it was enlarged, the space was enlarged, he was able to survive the attack of Ishbi. Like Rashi says, I'm reading just the Rashis that I want to add some insight. Is he sat on the actual press. Ishbi, again, we just said how large he was. He was a large giant, so he had weight, was to push him into the ground and crush him. So Makale Ara Mitusei Nisrachecha Ars Mitachtav, the earth got soft, and therefore it didn't hurt him. Another way to look at it is Maka Nishvalaka Ein Guma Vayamaginelov. There was kind of a hole. A guma is like a little space in the ground that he was able to survive. But either way, he wasn't crushed by Ishbi. So Rabbi Steinsaltz over here says the hunt with the falcon was a hunting method widespread in the ancient times, and still popular sport today in the Middle East that we know. People could do it till today in Saudi Arabia or in Dubai. He says the meaning that he placed him in a garment and wrapped him in it. So he kind of wrapped him in kamete, he doubled him over, he wrapped him in Ramah. He quotes the Ramah that says he wrapped him in kind of like in a let's say a blanket or something to hold him in a ball to be able to crush him. Okay, we'll read this quick one about Satan. So what had happened? The Satan actually disguised himself as the deer. It says in biblical rabbinical literature, the figure Satan is a prosecuting angel whose name means adversary. Therefore, his title is more accurately rendered as the Satan. In the incident related here, his role is that of an emissary of God. In one of Zechariah's visions, the prophet sees Satan charging Yeshua the high priest with an unspecific accusation. The Satan's evil image stems primarily from his role in the opening sequence of the book of Job. Okay, he's referring to where we find the Satan as an entity. But in this case over here, Satan is trying to seduce. We also find in Medrashim, we find with Avram Avinu, the Satan comes in different ways to try to sidetrack Avram from doing the Akedah. Okay, let's go further down. Ahu Yama. So David's kind of whatever. He's not being killed, but he's being tormented by Ishbi. He's alone. Again, the story is obviously needs a lot of insight. The whole idea of the falcon hunting and the attacking the deer with the spear and chasing the deer. He's the king. Okay, even the king wants a moment alone, but either way, that's what happened. Is Ahu Yema is Afanya Demali Shabbat Ahava. That day was before the dusk of the Shabbos Eve, meaning he was getting ready for Shabbos. And one of David's, now I checked the lineage, if I'm not mistaken, Avishai is this I'm sure of. Avishai, there was three brothers, Avishai, Yoav, and Asael. Yoav was David's faithful general. He's the main personality we find in the life of David. He's the general of the army. That's Yoav ben Zeruiah. If I'm not mistaken, Zeruiah is David's sister. And therefore, Abishai, who's another brother, so there's Abishai, Asael, and Yoav. Abishai, some people say they're cousins, but it seems like they're nephews, because I think Zeruiah is a sister of David. Zeruiah is also a daughter, I think, of Yishai, the father of David, and she had three sons. One of them was Avishai, and they went with David. Either way, these were his relatives that went with David, and Avishai was also a general, and he had different qualities. We see him from the beginning of David's career as even the days when he was running away from Saul. So Avishai is very close to David. So it's Friday afternoon. It's getting ready for Shabbos. And Avishai ben Zeruiah have a kachayev reisha be'arba garbri demaya. So Avishai is getting ready. The halacha is right. Avishai is getting ready for Shabbos, and he's washing his hair, and in 4 jugs of water. Is chazenu kismi dama. He sees drops of blood, I guess, in the water. And ikadamre, he doesn't see drops of blood, but asa yoina itrif kameh, and a dove came and started to flap its wings around David, right? So Avishai. So Avishai said that Knesset Yisrael yoina imsilia. The Jewish people are like a dove. And so therefore he said, as it says, you shall shine at the wings of a dove covered with silver. So that's a sign of the Jewish people. And he said, if the dove represents the Jewish people and the dove is coming to floundering his wings in front of me, he right away said, either from the blood or both, Shema Mina David Malki Yisrael B'tzar Shari. He understood right away King David is in a bad situation. He's in a tsar. He's in a dire situation. Also, so he went to that palace. He didn't see him. No one knows where David is. Omar, he said he went to the base medrash. This is amazing times. If imagine how people thought. It says Tanan, we learned we can't ride the horse of the king. Now, King David, we know from the story. Last week's Haftorah, the back part of the Haftorah is at the end of the Haftorah. They take Solomon and they ride him on the parrot. Parrot was the mule of the king. The mule was a special horse that the king had. So it says, Ein reich masusa, you can't ride on the king's horse. Vein yoish makisa, you can't sit in the king's seat. Vein mishtamshim b'sharbita, you can't use the specter of the king. I mean, you can't use the private property of the king. It's not a sign of respect. So he went into base medrash. B'shas sakana mai. What about in the time of a dire situation? David's life is at stake. Also, Shel Beit Midrash, he went into base medrash and asked. Imagine, see, David's he's sure, he's not even in doubt. David is in a bad situation, and he needs to help David, but he has to first ask the halacha. What do we do halachically? So he went into base medrash. Amrle, they told him, Shasa Sakana Shapradam Yiladu. Okay. But first I'm going to learn Rashi, and then I'm going to say a few commentaries on the story. It says, Ba'arba Gabri Demaya, what is he washed his head in 4 jugs of water. Arba Sin Shamayim. Okay, different amounts of water that he was washing his hair before Shabbos, and he saw the dove and the blood were both, and he understood that David was in trouble. So Itruf Kamei. So it was the dove was showing sign of pain, and he understood that if the dove represents the Jewish people, and who's in charge of the Jewish people is David. So he understood the dove that the dove who represents the Jewish people is representing the head of the Jewish people. So he figured that this is a dire situation, and he has to help. He has to figure out what's going on with King David. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly. There's just a few questions here. One question is, it says, first of all, the question is, we don't use magic. We're not halachically, you're not allowed to use signs, animals flapping their wings or blood. That's a nachesh. You're not allowed to use signs. That's one of the prohibitions of the Torah. So how did he use signs to know that David was in trouble? That should have been something that's forbidden. We don't let a black cat crossed me is a bad sign. So he says it wasn't that the dove was telling him. It was more like just a simon that he was able to see that he understood something was wrong. And from there he started to investigate. He couldn't find David. The question they ask over here is that what was the story with David's horse? Why did he have to use David's horse? Why couldn't he use his own horse? So it says because David had the special mule. And it's brought down that the mule is a forbidden animal because it's kalayim. Everyone knows the laws of kalayim. How does a mule come about? It's from a relationship between a donkey and a horse, and that's kalayim. And therefore, even though the mule could have been bought somewhere, but a Jewish person shouldn't use a mule. And they say two things. One is that doesn't apply to the king. So therefore, the only mule that was available was the mule of the king, or of the kosher mule, so to say, was the mule of the king, because for a king it's okay. And even though for most people it's not, so therefore he wasn't going to just use a mule. He would have to use the king's mule, and the mule was the fastest way for him to try to find David. Evidently, a mule is faster than a horse. And the second thing another answer was that this mule was not the mule that was made by a mixed relationship. There was a mule that was made in the time of. He quotes a commentary. Doesn't say the source of it. That could we find that also that Shlomo rode the mule, the parrot. So there was a parrot from the days of 6 days of creation. I mean, there was a mule that was created without kalayim, without mixing the species of animals, and that's the same one that David had. So he had the one that wasn't created through the forbidden relationship. Today, a mule is made through the relationship between a horse and a donkey, but then there was one mule that was created that way. And that's the mule that David had, and therefore Abishai was not going to ride a non-kosher mule, so he only wanted to ride David's mule. So they asked the halach and the Beis Medrash, and they said, yes, you could, because it's sakana. If David is missing and you see blood and there's problems, we need to go quickly and find David. So what happens? Rachve lepride, he jumps on the mule of David. And there, we're going to get to here in a second. The Gemara goes back to this. He had a miracle. This is one of the places, the miracle, like in the story last week's parsha. And next week's parsha, the ground contracts for Abishai, and he's able to quickly get to wherever he's tracing to find David. Doesn't say he obviously had a lot of intuition. He could have been north, south, east, west. He could have been anywhere. He could have been hidden. There's no indication of where he was. So how did he know where to run? So he's running down. So the ground contracted. As he was progressing, he saw Arpa. So Arpa's sitting there. Arpa again is Ruth's ex-sister-in-law, both married to Naomi's sons. And she's the mother of Ishbi and of Goliath, right? And she's spinning. That was the second picture I showed. So she had this spindle that she used, and she was knitting. And kichasiza pasca lepilka shadei ilvoi. So she's sitting there spinning, and she knows, I guess, what's happening to her son, what her son is doing to David. And she sees him. She probably figured Abishai is coming to save David. So she saw him, and she removed the spindle, and she threw it at him, intending to kill Abishai, but she misses. She was a bad shot. So she said to him afterwards, Alam, I see li pelach. She says, give me my spindle back. So she says, young man, bring me my spindle. So what did he do? He threw it as a spear and he killed her. So he kills Arpa, the mother of Goliath and Ishbi. And again, some relation to David, if I'm not mistaken, an aunt, a great aunt, because Ruth was the grandmother of David. And so now he kills Arpa. Rashi just says, Again, some reason he knew that he was going towards the Philistine, so the ground kind of contracted, and he was able to quickly get to the Philistines. Again, it's all Erev Shabbos. Who's Arpa? The Rashi says, Ima the Ishbi, the mother of Yishbi. Nivla, she was Tava, she was sewing. Kad Chazis Arpa la Avishai, Sarva Maktale. When she sees Avishai, she wants to kill him. With the same spindle that she has in her hand, but she couldn't kill him. She said to Avishai, I see lachahu pelach denaflim lefanach. Pick it up and give it back to me. So it says that Avishai so he threw the spindle at her. Again, it's like a spear. It could be used as a weapon, and he does, and he kills Arpa. So Arpa, this is her final end. Arpa has the Gemorah. Those who want to know more about Arpa's life, which was very interesting, you could learn it in the Gemorah of Sota. Okay, so the Gemorah continues. Kad Chazi Yishbi b'nayv. So she sees now Yishbi. He sees now Yishbi, Avishai. Ishbi sees Avishai. And he says, again, they're all mishpacha. He says, Hashta havu beitrei. There's two people. There's David and Yishbi. He says, he can fight David. He can't fight again. Avishai wasn't just anyone. He was a general. He was a warrior. So you have two great warriors against Yishbi. So great as Yishbi was, he was no match for two people. So he says, Hashta havu beitrei v'katlin. They're going to kill me. Is paskele David leila. He threw David up. And then Vidalates Lirachume, he's kind of positioned that spear that we spoke about in the ground, so David should fall on the spear and die. So he wanted to kill David finally. I mean, he was playing with him, basically, playing with his food. Is Amar Nipal Allah v'niktal, let him fall in it and be killed. Amar Avishai Shem, so Avishai said the name of God and performed the miracle by using the name of God. We find that also in Moses used the name of God to kill the Mitzri. So there's times that especially for the life and the safety of the king of Israel, he said the name of God, the Shem Firish. And David just stayed still. He froze. So he's in midair now. He's not on the floor, and he's not falling on the spear. So his life for the moment is saved. And obviously the question the Gemara is going to ask is, hold on, Aaron, 1 second. Yeah, go ahead. What's your question, Aaron?
Was he allowed to at that time to use Hashem's name or not?
But he was allowed to, because again, he already had a psak in the Beis Medrash that this is a sakana for David's life. So if he could ride his horse, he could do other things if he could ride his mule, he could do other things that are for the safety of David. Again, David's life is not a private life; it's a life of the Jewish people. It means that also if he would kill David, who knows what would happen. So Rashi says, Pascal David Leila Zarka Klapi Mali, threw David up in the air. And obviously Ishbi was a giant of a man. David wasn't lightweight, he just threw him up in the air. And he put his spear in the ground, so he should fall in the spear and die. So he says, let's see what it says. Some explain that the reason Yishbi threw David up in the air and did not kill him, right? The obvious question, why was he playing around? If he sees two people that are coming to attack him, now he has Abishai and David together, they could kill him. And so he felt, why didn't he just quickly take a sword out and kill David? Is that it's directly, is that he thought to torture David by extending his ordeal. That's one thing. Okay, he wanted to torture him. He figured there's no way for him to be saved. I'll throw him up in the air, I'll put my spear. Others explain that once he saw the miracle performed for David, that he was not crushed, he thought that David was delivered by means of witchcraft. Therefore, he sought to kill him in a manner, since it is not susceptible to witchcraft. Why would it not be susceptible to witchcraft? We know from the story, I don't know if we learned it, I think we learned it in Sanhedrin, that when Shimon ben Shatach wanted to capture the witches, right? Remember the whole story that we're talking about, we learned the laws, they're not allowed to kill more than one day. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Shimon ben Shatach killed a whole bunch of witches in one night. So the Gemara says that it gives an answer that it was a different situation. It was a moment of that had to happen. But one of the things it said, how did he kill them? He lifted them off the ground, because when they're off the ground, they don't have a power of witchcraft. So there's no witchcraft when you're off the ground. So he figured he can't kill David if David's on the ground. So he threw him in the air, and then the witchcraft would wear off, and then he would fall on the spear. Okay. It says V'nei Milei. So now the Gemara asks a good question. It's a famous concept in Torah that applies to our lives. What did he say? Why? If the way to save his life was by pronouncing the Shem Hashem, so why did he not say it himself? Let David say the name of God. He knows the name of God. Here the Gemorah says a famous answer, which applies in therapy and applies in our life. If a person themselves, a prisoner, does not release himself from prison. Yes, when you're yourself imprisoned, whether it's a physical space or an emotional space or an intellectual space, whatever that space is, then you need help from the outside. We see that all the time. That's not a person says, "Well, just get out of it." You can't. When you're chavish, when you're locked in prison yourself, you can't take yourself out. And therefore, even though in theory David could have said the name of God, but he was trapped. He was in the wrong place, and therefore he had no ability to help himself. And the only one who could help him would be Abishai, although he said something that he should also have been able to say. He said the name of God. So he says, what's Rashi say? So he says, Rashi says, let David say the name of God. So ein chavish, ein daite mikavenas. So what does it mean? You don't have the strength of your mind. When a person themselves is imprisoned, is in a dire situation, you don't have the mindset. Ein daite mikavenas le'em Hashem. You can't say the name of God. David was in no mindset to protect himself, and therefore, v'hashta nitzel David v'shlichu Hashem b'rachik le'em Hashem v'hashta nitzel David. Now he's saved. V'shlichu Hashem b'rachik v'holcha Abishai v'David chazrulem. So what happened? The Rashi tells us a little bit of the part that when he said the name of God, he stood up freeze, and then kind of he got thrown to the side, and now he was distant from Yishai and from Ishbi, and Avishai and David were able to run away. So they're running away from Yishai, from Ishbi. Avishai and David are running away from Ishbi because he was put up in the air. And Rashi says, "V'shlichu Hashem b'rachik." God threw him far. So now they have a distance between David and Ishbi. So quickly, Avishai turns to David and says, what's going on over here? How did you end up over here? What's the story, right? There's obviously a story. It doesn't make sense. So David understood right away that this was the punishment that God told him about. This is what God said. So he said, that he gave me a choice, and this is what I respond to him. I told him I'd rather be captive than my children to be destroyed. So this is the story. This is what I do. I guess David was also in a state of yish. What could he do? He can't help himself. So this is an amazing Gemorah. Abishai says, "No, I don't subscribe to your whole thinking." David's worry about his family, his descendants, and Abishai says, "I don't know what you're talking about. You're the king. You have to live. Your kids, that's their problem." You have to change the tefillah. Don't change it. You don't want. It's not about you anymore. You have to be saved. And if your children have to be destroyed, your children be destroyed. It says, "Let your sons sell wax, and you will not suffer." You don't have to suffer now, so your sons should have a better life. It's a fundamental question of parenting, right? How much are parents ready to suffer for their children? In general, how do you? The question of how much my life doesn't matter. It's better for my kids. I'm going to give it. I'm going to work so my kids have education. That's how most people look. Or I'm going to give everything for my kids. That kind of thinking. So David also said, if this question between me or my children, my descendants come first. And Avishai did not subscribe to that. So I don't know what you're talking about. You have to live. You're the king. Turn around your prayer. Let your kids, if they have to sell wax because they're being punished, that's their problem. They'll have to deal with it. You have to be alive. That's what Avishai says to David. So it's my boy he said, like Rashi says, Avishai says to David, Lama Basilikan, what are you doing in the Philistines? I'm like, God told me. Do you want me to destroy your children? I'm going to put you in the hands of your enemies. And David didn't know that he's running to his enemies. He was chasing the deer. I guess he quickly learned what was going on. I'd rather be in my enemy's hand, and here I am. I'm stuck with Ishbi. So Avishai responds to him. Don't change it. Rashi says clearly. He says, "Tell God you would rather him punish your children. What's your problem about your children?" It's amazing. This is not a simple question. It's not a simple answer of what what, so to say, Abishai is telling David he has to choose. Saying basically, it's an example that your kids pick wax better than you having to deal with. It means to live a hard life, then you have to be in your enemies. Amrlei is, so David says, okay, if that's the case, if you think that I have to change my tefillah and I have to live and my kids have to suffer, is Saya Bahadan, help me daven. Avishai was also a big tzaddik. This is what it means that Avishai helped him, not that he helped him. In the fighting, he helped him in the prayer to change the decree. He helped him in his davening. And he said, he recited the sacred name, another sacred name, it says, and caused David to land safely. And then Rashi says, help me change the prayer. Okay, so now they are running away from Ishbi. It's Hakaradfe Basrayo. He ran after them. They're running away, and he runs after them. Kimatu Kubi, they came to a place called Kubi. In those days, like Rashi says, they knew the energy of the city's names. It means, so what is the name Kubi? So they said, meaning David and Avishai said that Kubi means stand against them. Kumbe, stand against Avishai. So we're talking about great people here. So they look at a name, they see the energy of the city. The city is to tell them that they could fight Avishai, Ishbi, but they're still running. They obviously didn't have enough confidence. Kimati Beitrei, and they came to the city called Beitrei. Amre, they said, Beitrei Gurion Katularie, 2 cubs, lion cubs, can kill the lion. So they viewed themselves as lion cubs, and as Ishbi as the lion, but they're 2 lion cubs. And so Zil Ishkach La'arb. So now the second city they knew that God is really telling them that it's time to take care of Ishbi. So Amrullah, so they say to Ishbi, so it's amazing how strong the guy was. They needed to weaken him they needed to throw him off his game. So this is the same David who, as a young boy, kills Goliath with the slingshot. And here, evidently, either Ishbi is like, maybe that's what the Gemorah says. He was wearing all those armaments. He wasn't vulnerable. It says that Goliath, laughing at David, took off all his armaments. But here, Ishbi is in all his gear. So they said to him, Zil ishtach la'arpa imach bekivra. And now we understand the story of Arpa. Arpa tried to kill Avishai. That story seemingly is a weird story in the Gemorah, that she happens to be knitting when he's chasing to find David. Maybe she was on the lookout, to protect her son. And she tried to kill him with the spindle spear, and he kills her. So in order to weaken Yishbi's mental state, they say, go find your mother in the grave. Basically, I killed your mother. So when he mentioned his mother, he got weak, and they killed him. And he said, this is what it says, Oz nishbu anshe David loi. That's when David's men took an oath. I don't know, there's no Rashi on this or commentaries what this means, but the pasuk basically says that Oz nishbu anshe David, David's men said, doesn't say how old David was. David lived till 70. Right? We learned till the end of last week's parsha. It doesn't say what age he was at this story. What time of his what stage of his kingdom was he in? Hebron, was he in Jerusalem? But it says Az Nishba Anshe David. Then they promised him, David's no longer going out to war. Like the Kabbalah Yisrael, that the candle visible should not be extinguished. So they said, David, you stay at home. That's why it says that David would learn and Yoav would fight. So I guess those who have the question, that's, they say, Ilulei David, the famous Gemorah that everyone's actually quoting now. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. But Ilulei David, if not for David's learning, Yoav wouldn't be able to fight. And if not for Yoav's fighting, David wouldn't be able to learn. It's a partnership. Some have to learn Torah and some have to fight. So the Gemorah says, if not for David learning, then Yoav wouldn't be able to fight. And if not for Yoav fighting, David wouldn't be able to learn. But we know that David himself fought. So I guess this may be the point when David stopped fighting, because they said, no longer are you going to come with us to war. You can hang up your sword. You're going to stay in the palace. You learn Torah. So we're going to just learn the Rashis here. He says, how you with our speech, and they had to run away from him because he was in the Philistines. Yishbi. They came to the city of Kubi. So Rashi says, La'oisik far, they came to a village, not a city, a village. Sheshmai Kubi, Shebein Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Plishtim. The place Kubi is between the Philistines and Eretz Yisrael. So it's, I guess, kind of a border city. Amr Kumbe, that means that we could get him. Amruzel Amud Kinegdai Valtivrach means that we shouldn't stop running. We should turn around and kill him. That's why the city is called Kubi, because we could get him. Rashi says an amazing thing, that David and Abishai were experts in names, and they, from the names of a city, they understood the energy of the moment. But nevertheless, knowing that there wasn't enough, they kept on running until Kimat Beit Trei. They came to the city of Beit Trei. Amru Ben Trei Guria Bitmia, between two cubs, we have to be concerned. So Bekivra Shaharguna, it says that she was in the cave. Why was she in the cave? Obviously, because Ishbi was Avishai killed Arpa. Okay, sorry, but I actually, many Evan Yisrael is a friend of mine who runs the Steinsaltz Institute. Rabbi Steinsaltz's son, I actually sent him a few messages about the pages, seem to be missing the bottom. So this ends page 95a, but there's still 2 lines in the Gemorah. So if anyone has the actual Gemorah in front of them, you'll see there's going to be a continuation. But before that, it just says that there is a Rashi that says over here, what was the weakness that Ishbi had when Avishai mentioned his mother? So he quotes 2 things. One is, of course, your mother's in the grave is enough to throw a person off balance, and the second was when he mentioned her name, her behavior. The Gemara again, the Gemara Sota describes Orpah's behavior as being the Gemara says a lot of positive things about Orpah. Hold on, Aaron, about Orpah when she was, how she left her mother-in-law and all that. But at the end, she became a really, she was a woman, living with all these men in Philistine. So he mentioned her behavior, her name, her behavior kind of affected her strength. Yes, Aaron.
Isn't that rude what he said about the mother?
It's not rude. He had to save himself. He was trying to throw. He needed to Yishbi to lose his focus. So by saying that he killed his mother, he made Yishbi.
No, but they said that you said that it made him off balance.
I know, but because he mentioned that his mother was killed, or he mentioned just his mother's name, that alone kind of brought up bad energy because of her behavior.
Okay.
I mean, it's rude. It's rude. He's trying to kill David. I mean, let's not get too particular. All right. So the Gemara is going to continue. Let's just continue a little further. The Gemara is going to say, Taner Rabbanim. This is not, again, I'm not reading from the Steinsaltz because it's missing. Taner Rabbanim Shleisha Kafsam Aretz. It's a famous Gemara. 3 people that the ground contracted for. Eliezer Eved Avram, last week's parsha. Eliezer, the servant of Avram, that he comes quickly to Haran to meet Besuel and to marry off Rivka. So Yitzchak, that's number 1. V'Yaakov Avinu, that's next week's parsha. We're going to learn in a second what happened to Yaakov. So Yaakov, also the ground contracted for him, had Kvitzas Derech, and Avishai ben Zeruiah. Avishai, our story, right? It says Avishai, right away, the ground on Friday moved for him so he could be in the Philistines immediately. Again, whether he was in Hebron or Yerushalayim, it's a distance. So he says Avishai ben, obviously Eliezer was it was much longer distance. From Eretz Yisrael to Haran is much further than from anywhere in Israel to the Philistines, but nevertheless, it was a distance. So Avishai ben Zeruiah Hadamran. What's the story of the ground contracting for Avishai that we just studied about? Eliezer Avod Avram. What's the story with Eliezer, the servant of Avram? The Chesiv says that we know the famous Rashi that says that he says, "I came today to the well." Meaning to say, the same day I left is the same day I came. Meaning again, the distance between Eretz Yisrael and Haran, which is today modern day Iraq, and traveling by camels, right, should take a few days. It take more than a few days to travel from Eretz Yisrael, from where Avram lived in Beersheba. So talking about south of Eretz Yisrael. Even Hebron is south of Eretz Yisrael. To make it all the way to Haran is a far distance, and he made it there in 1 day. So it means the ground contracted for him. What's Yaakov Avinu? What's our father Yaakov? I'm going to push now. The Gemara kind of gets back to where it should be. So let's just do the next page. What's Yaakov Avinu? Sorry, previous. Go to the next. What's Yaakov Avinu? So the Chesiv, as it says, Vayetz Yaakov in Beersheba. That's the beginning of next week's parsha. So Yaakov leaves After this week's parsha, gets into a fight. I'm not gonna no spoilers. Spoiler alert! I'm going to tell you the end of the parsha. Yaakov steals the blessings from Esav. Esav wants to kill him. Yaakov has to run away. His parents send him to his uncle Laban. So it says Vayetze Yaakov Beersheva. He leaves Beersheva. Vayel Haran. He goes to Haran. Uchsiv, and it says Vayifka b'makom. He encountered Vayifka, the place. Vayalan Sham Kivar Shemesh, and he sleeps because the sun set. So what does that mean? When he got to Haran, he went all the way to Haran, however long that took him. Is it possible that I prayed, that I passed the place of my fathers, meaning that would make sense if he's leaving Beersheva, again, which is again all the way in the south, and he's going Haran, which is northeast, so he passes Jerusalem. So he's passing Jerusalem and eventually making the right turn towards, I guess maybe the Golan Heights, the path of the fathers. We know the path of how they traveled. So he's passing Jerusalem. So he says, is it possible I passed the place of my fathers and I didn't pray? Let me go back. So he's going to go all the way back to pray. Given the Hirabadaiti Lemheder, as soon as he thought to go back, the ground shifted immediately for him to go all the way back to Jerusalem. So he zoomed all the way back to Haran, from Haran all the way to Yerushalayim. Rashi says that so there's an interesting Rashi it's not by Steinbach doesn't have this Rashi. I want to bring it up in a second. So Rashi says, from here we clearly see he made it all the way to Haran. Again, further, it's all the way in Macedonia, all the way in modern day Iraq. He was still in Beiskel. Okay, the Rashi, we're going to learn next week's Rashi that the whole thing was contracted to Beiskel. So Rashi here says that there's a different opinion where Beiskel is. Is Beiskel actually Jerusalem, or is Beiskel in between? But either way, Rashi here says Beiskel is Yerushalayim and Haran Chutz La'aretz. Amazing Rashi. Seems Rashi, what's Rashi saying? Right. Seemingly Rashi is telling us Beiskel is Yerushalayim, that he went all the way back to Yerushalayim. But what's Haran Chutz La'aretz? Haran. And Chutz La'aretz has many cities. I think we know Haran represents the Haran Afshamakim, the anger of God. It's not a good place. I think there's a little alluding over here, if I may be free to read into Rashi's thinking, that anything that's Chutz La'aretz, anything that's outside of Eretz Yisrael is Haran. There's no good place outside of Eretz Yisrael. There's either Beiskel, which is Yerushalayim, or Chutz La'aretz, that's Haran. Haran is a place that God's not happy with. All right, that's my own insight of Rashi. She's followed by a voice. I went to the place that my fathers have prayed. Meaning, who's his fathers? Obviously, Avram Yitzchak, and he quotes the verses where Avram and Yitzchak pray at Har Moriah. Hahar b'daiti l'mahad l'makom. He was going to go back. It's Kaf Slayar. The ground shifted. V'hayasham miyad. He immediately was there. Mikra mechiach t'chsiv yifka b'makom shamakim pagu. Shekaf Slayar arts v'niskar v'amakom. That's why the wording is v'yifka. He met the place because that's showing us that kind of as soon as he thought about it, boom, he was there at the place. Davar acher. Another lashon is. And again, there's a lot of people. Rashi, I saw on the side, the Gra as well, says that this little line of the Gemara should be taken out because it kind of doesn't fit with what we're trying to say. Davracha in Pigil Tefillah, that he davened. I mean, it says V'yifka b'makom he davened. Shneim v'ata al tispal ba'adam azeh v'altisa ba'adam rino tefil v'atifku bi. So we see the word tifka that he met the place is a lashon of tefillah. Okay, that's hard. That's hard to see how this fits into the Gemara. But let's just go a little further. Vayalan Sham, this is all the story because it's connected to next week's parsha. We might as well learn it. Vayalan Sham kivar Shemesh, he sleeps. Obviously we know that why is the Torah telling us that Vayalan Sham he had to sleep because all of a sudden kivar Shemesh, the sun had set. Basher the tzadi, as soon as he davened, boy lemeder, he was thinking about going back. It means the middle of the day, meaning to say it wasn't night yet. It wasn't the proper time for night. Although I was thinking, I didn't see any commentaries on this. I was thinking the question is that what do we learn from here? The Gemara tells us, or one of the Lashonis tells us that this is where we see that Yaakov was Misakin Arvis, Ma'ariv. Based on this Gemara, it seems like it wasn't Ma'ariv because it was the middle of the day. Basid Tzali Bayil Meheder, he wanted to go. Only the sun set immediately as a miracle. So I'm not sure how we know from there that it's Ma'ariv, unless I'm totally off on what I'm saying, but I think that's one of the proofs of Ma'ariv is that he davened and then it was before he went to sleep. Either way, he was going to go back. It was the middle of the day. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, so Hashem said, Tzadik zeh ba lebeis moiloni, came to my home, right? God, Yaakov came back to God's home. According to Rashi over here, again, Rashi and the Chumash, I don't think it says Beis Kel is Yerushalayim, but I have to remember. But over here, we'll have to see it next week. But according to here, he goes back to Yerushalayim. So God says, this righteous person comes to my home, to my alone, my place of rest. Yifat Belina, and let him just come and leave without spending the night. Miyad ba Hashemesh, so the son immediately said. So that's why later, when do we find again the son connected to Yaakov? Later in the end of Vayishlach, when Yaakov gets into the battle with the angel of Esav, it says he hurts his leg. So then it says Vayisrach Hashemesh, the sun shines for him. And so when there we learn that the sun healed Yaakov. But also Vayisrach Hashemesh seems, if you just the literal translation, is the sun shone for him, that it wasn't ready for the sun to rise. And the sun specifically rise for Yaakov. The Gemara says only for him the sun rose and started to shine. That was the time for the morning break, right? The same sun that came specifically for Yaakov early also set for Yaakov. So from here we learn that the sun set early for Yaakov. I think we could do one more small piece. Oh yeah, because this finishes off the subject. Uminolan the kol azar de David. How do we know that? So let's go back to the original story. David is faced by God, and God says to David that you have a choice: either you die or you fall in the hands of your enemies, or your children are going to be ceased to exist. Right. So David initially took it upon himself for himself to be punished, but then Abishai told him to switch the prayer. So then the switch had to happen, right? So we know the Kol Azar de David. Where do we see that the descendants of David were ceased to exist? So then we have a famous story. What was the story? Achav is the king of Israel. Achav's wife is Jezebel, right? Everyone knows she was a wicked queen. She was from the Phoenicians. She brought in all the idol worship into the north. In those days, there were the two kingdoms. Achav was a very powerful king, and I think Yehoshaphat, if I'm not mistaken, was the king of Yehuda. If anyone knows, could correct me, then maybe it was another king. Or Amatzia. I think Amatzia was the son of that. Yes, so it was Yehoshaphat, and then there was Amatzia, and then there was the last king, Yoash. So what happened was Yehoshaphat marries off his son Amatzia to the prince to the daughter of Achav, which is the daughter of Isabel, and her name is Atalia. And Atalia is Aim Achaziah, the mother sorry. She is the mother of Achaziah. So there's someone in between. And Rasa, when Atalia, so she's a wicked queen because she's the descendant of Achav and her mother Isabel. So and she gets they make a marriage for peace, and they bring this wicked queen who almost destroyed the house of David into to be the queen of, and she marries Achaziah. And Rasiki Meisbina, Achaziah dies in battle. Right later, Achaziah goes into battle with her uncle or his uncle or cousin, either with Achav himself or the son of Achav, but he gets killed in the battle. Rasiki Meisbina, talking about David calls her Malacha. She decided to kill every descendant of David. She was going to take revenge on the house of David after her son was killed. And only we know the famous story. Yoash himself was remained, and he was hidden in the Holy of Holies by the high priest, and he comes out, and then they crown him at 7 years old, and he kills Atalia, and then they bring back Judaism to, the whole base of Mikdash was in ruins. So the Gemara says, she said that all his children had to be destroyed. Yoash survived. Everything is Mida Keneged Mizda. So just like Doeg, Hadomi, and Saul killed the whole city of Kohanim, and I remember I mentioned earlier, there was one Kohen that survived, that was Avyasar, later to become part of David's entourage of high priests, or the priest. Later in the story with the anointing of Solomon, he comes up in last week's Haftarah of Yasser, but then comes so because he was survived, so Yoash also survived. So there's one descendant that survived the house of David, and he started again the descendants of David. So anyone today who's a descendant of David has to be a descendant of Yoash, seemingly from this Gemorah. That we know there had to be no Rav Yasser survived, because it says one son of Achimelech, ben Achituv, the son of Achituv, V'shmai of Yasser, he survived. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, so Rav Yehuda said, the Model Yishtar of Yasser, Achimelech, ben Achituv, had Saul not left one person alive, which was of Yasser the Kohen, We would have no remain of the house of David. Because one coin survived, so therefore Yoash survived, and therefore we have the continuation of the lineage of the house of David. Yes, Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I just want to say, what are we supposed to get out of this story?
This is the Gemara. This is called Agada. Agada we get. There's between the lines. In those who learn Tanya daily, you know that all the secrets of Torah are hidden in these stories. It says all the secrets of that means when you learn a law, don't build a house, don't do this. Those are simple laws. You want to know really the deep thinking of God. Try to tap into the secrets of God. That's in these stories. You have to find them. They're the gems that are there. You just have to find them. Sometimes you'll find them in the characters of people. I think that for me, in my personal life, I find a lot of strength from these Gemaras of the happenings of our forefathers, and a lot we can learn from people's behaviors today are reflected in stories in the past. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish you all a great day, and those who are celebrating, of course, the Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Laila Tov.
Thank you.